Welcome to our next section in Automation Framework Development with Selenium Java course. So today we'll be talking about an introduction to Selenium Grid and Parallel test and how to achieve Selenium Grid and Parallel test within our current framework. So finally, Selenium Grid and Parallel execution is going to happen within our current framework itself. Well, we have already covered Selenium Grid in our basic video tidbits, but we did not upgrade our current course framework to support parallelism. So before jumping into Selenium Grid and Parallel execution, let's understand what they are. Selenium Grid allows you to scale by distributing tests on several machines like parallel execution, and then it manages multiple environments from a central point, making it easy to run the test against a vast combination of browsers and operating systems. So basically, we can run the Selenium Grid. If you set up the Selenium Grid, you can run the test on different browsers like Firefox, Chrome, and IE, even Edge, and also in different operating systems like Windows, Linux, Mac, etc. And also we can minimize the maintenance time for the grid by allowing you to implement custom hooks to leverage the virtual infrastructure for instances. So these things we can achieve with Selenium Grid. So Selenium Grid setup is going to look something like this. We have already discussed about it in our basic course. So it's very simple. All we need to have is a Selenium server, or also known as hub, and then we need to have Selenium node, one node, or we can have multiple nodes as well. So these nodes can be a different operating system, they can be a different browsers running on them, or it can be sitting within your local network, or it can be in your remote network. So it can be anything. So if these clients or nodes has access to the Selenium server or hub using an IP address, then that's it. You can connect it and you can run the test on these things. And the command to make the Selenium to run as a hub or a node is this: java-jar, and then just specify the jar file and just specify the role as hub, then it becomes a hub. And if you specify the role as a node, then just specify -role as node. That's it. So your test will start running within the Selenium hub and role setup, or otherwise called as Selenium Grid setup. But let's talk about parallelism. So let's first of all understand what is parallelism and what this really mean and what we really need out of it. Parallelism can be execution of multiple tests same times in multiple machines, maybe in multiple browser. This way we can save some time in executing our test, right? So let's understand how we can achieve parallelism and Selenium Grid together to make our test run flawlessly. If you think about the technical details of what is going to happen, the parallelism can be achieved with the help of test frameworks such as TestNG, JUnit, etc. Since these frameworks has option to spawn multiple threads same time and run test at the same time, and mimicking the test to run in parallel threads, right? That's what is this parallelism we can achieve much simply using TestNG and JUnit. And in TestNG, we have a attribute in testng.xml file, something like parallel is equal to test, or parallel is equal to classes or methods. If you specify that these methods or test or classes are going to run in parallel threads. But please take a note that Selenium Grid by itself won't run test in parallel, since it just takes any number of requests from the client and start serving it. That's what is Selenium Grid going to do. We have to make our test run in parallel so that Selenium server or grid setup can start accepting number of requests from the client and then start working by running as a parallel test. But do you think just by using TestNG parallel option we can run our complete test in parallel? Well, the answer is no. In order to achieve parallel execution, we need to make few code changes so that the test is always going to be thread safe. Again, Java is a multi-threaded programming language, which means we can develop multi-threaded program using Java, and we can run our test to handle these kinds of threads and start working with it. So if you don't really have any information on what is this thread and how the thread is actually working, so please go ahead and watch some other videos in Java basics to understand what thread is. Well, thread is most important thing in parallel execution itself. So we have to understand how the thread is working. Since TestNG can spawn multiple threads same time, our code should handle those threads safely to make the efficient usage while running the test. Else we'll be ending up with a concurrent thread exception, something like this. As you can see here, we have a concurrent thread pool executor run worker, and there is an exception happening in this area. So make sure that our test is actually running in a same thread. If not, we're going to end up with these kind of problems. So that brings us to the following problems now. All our existing code in framework are static variables, static methods, right? And every method that we have are static, and there are most important variables, which is nothing but the WebDriver, is also static. So a static variable is common to all the instances of the class because it is a class level variable, right? In other words, you can say that only a single copy of static variable is created and shared among all the instances of the classes. So memory allocation for such variable only happen once when the class is loaded in the memory. So if you just create one WebDriver instance, that's it. That's going to be shared for the whole life cycle of the program. And if you try to run them in parallel, we are going to end up in problems, because if you have two browser instantiated with the same WebDriver variable, then one object is going to be shared between both of them, and it's going to create problems because you may be running login test and employee test, but at the end of the day, your tests are going to run in two different browsers and you will be sharing same object and you'll be getting these problems. Well, that clearly shows that we need to do following changes to our existing framework. We need to create a non-static WebDriver or remote WebDriver handling mechanism so that it can be used by TestNG to spawn multiple threads, right? So these threads are going to spawn multiple WebDriver requests from our code, and then this WebDriver is going to send multiple requests to the Selenium server so that it can open multiple browsers and start multiple tests parallelly, and then it is going to do multiple invocation of browsers via Selenium node. So that's job of Selenium server to do that. So these are the things going to happen in our code with our existing framework if we do these changes. Again, there are a few things to take care. As a disclaimer, neither Cucumber Reporter nor Extend Report supports parallel thread mechanisms. Thus, they won't work for now. At least in our course, we can't discuss about them. It is going to be a problem, but you can still see a report at least from the SureFile plugin. With all these theories in mind, let's get started and understand how things work. So for that, we're going to flip to IntelliJ IDE.